Hi, welcome to Oh That's Good, which is a casual conversation in which I talk to people who have unusual insight or understanding of things that I don't, about something that brings them either happiness or joy or some kind of pleasure. And they teach me about this thing that they understand or have insight in that I don't. And today I'm talking to Molly Cohen. She is an actor, a very talented actress who I've worked with several times. She's a director, she's a writer, she's an all-around incredible creative person. She's one of those people where the longer you get to know her, the more things that she's an expert at you discover she does. She's sort of like secretly a really good seamstress and costume designer, and just one of those people who's like hoovering up the world and putting it all inside her and learning all these things. So someone I'm very excited to talk to about something today. And hi, Molly.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. On this very rainy Friday.
It's very rainy. I am so soaked. I had to take a walk this morning and I just got drenched. So I'm drying out, but I'm in a nice dry theater and I'm talking to you. And good morning. And what are you going to teach me about today, Molly?
So there's a thing I do that not a lot of people know about, that I do it nor like what it is kind of in general. And that is figure modeling, which also now is more popularly known as art modeling.
Okay.
And it's something that I think a lot of people sort of can glorify or even like fetishize. And so I'm excited to talk about it and the ins and outs of it and why I think it's so special and important. So figure modeling, also known as art modeling, is the idea that when people are learning to draw or experts, the human form, the live figure is the most complicated piece of art in our world. The bone structure, the muscular structure. It's also an amazing way to naturally look at shadows and light, seeing how contours of our skin, the way our body is in motion but frozen in motion. And so I work with schools, students, artists, advanced learners, all the way to like first time people picking up a pen and pencil paper. And I model, I pose. And that can be something that it's just a couple minutes that they're doing quick sketches. It can be all the way to multiple sessions of one pose for like a long-term project. But I do kind of everything in between that. And I find it to be really meditative and very carnal. I really love it. And it's something that has brought me a lot of joy, but also confidence in myself, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I imagine.
Yeah.
Was that something so for me, like I am very shy about my body, I guess. And I'm just imagining like, if I were to think about wanting to do that, I would definitely be nervous about it. I mean, how did you come to it, or how did it come to you, or how did you get into it?
Yeah, kind of a weird story, but I was studying abroad my sophomore year of college in England, and I went to a drama school that was in a larger university. It was housed in a larger university, but it was very isolated. So I only ever went to this one building. It was on a different side of campus. And because of that, people knew that and would put up posts on a bulletin board, looking for an actor for this project or looking for waitresses, things like that. We had a really big call board. And there was a city center a couple miles down the road that did a Sunday morning 16 over art class. So you had to be 16 over to go.
Cool.
Or maybe it was like on a Friday morning, as to why it was for retired people only. And they were looking for models. And I saw it, and a friend of mine was like, oh, I'm going to apply. And she applied, and she did a session or two and said it was so wonderful. They were so kind. And that they were still looking for more people. And so I just reached out and I said, I've never done this before. I'm an exchange student, so I could use the money because I can't accept money elsewhere. And I don't have a car, and there was no train or bus to get there. I was like, so you'd have to pick me up. And the man who ran the program was so nice. And he was like, we love first timers. It's a really warm space. We'll feed you. So I was like, I'll do it. So I ended up going once, and it was wonderful. And I told them, I'm leaving in a couple weeks. So they brought me back for like 4 more sessions before I left. And then I didn't touch it again. I didn't do any of it again for about 3 or 4 years until I moved and was in need of some work, and also just kind of like got back to this space of wanting to. And once I reached out to a few places in DC, I just kind of like started working everywhere. And it was my main thing for about 2 years.
Wow. Yeah. Tell me about, you said that it brings you joy and confidence, and tell me about like the happiness part of that. What is it that you're experiencing? Is it while you're doing it, you're experiencing that? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So it is definitely really nerve-wracking. No matter how many times you do it, the first few moments of like you're entering into the space, you don't know these people. Usually you don't. Sometimes if you sat with them for a few times, it gets easier, but you still don't really know them. They're strangers. And there's still this level of like, as all modern humans, will I be judged? And it's not even on my figure. It's just me taking up space. And I'm a very, very small femme-bodied person, and entering into a space that is unknown to me, I don't take up a lot of space. Something I both struggle with and make active decisions to not do that. But I don't take a lot of space in general. And so when I go into a space that I'm supposed to command, it's hard. It's like, it's performative almost. And there's this first few minutes of a normal session. What would happen is they do gesture warm-up drawings. So it's like very quick, 1 to 2 minute, 10 of these really quick to get everyone warmed up, my body warmed up. And once I get to the end of that, it's like I enter into this new plane of like, this is my space now. And I've now figured out like the physical elements of, this is my chair, these are my stools, these are my props. And I've like unearthed what it is that I'm going to do. While I do these gestures, I figure out what am I going to do for these longer poses. And then I get this confidence of like, my body is here, and it is meant to be consumed however it is going to be consumed. And I have both total control and absolutely no control. And that like dichotomy is like joyful in a really weird way.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. I mean, you're right. That is such an interesting combination. You're both very vulnerable, but also you are. Are you commanding the room at all?
Yeah, I am. I definitely am. I'm the one, right, who sets the timer. I take the breaks when I want. I set the poses. I mean, sometimes I go into a space and it's a very structured class, and they're like, we're doing this kind of pose because we're working on this thing. But even in that, it's still my body. I'm still advocating for like, well, that turn doesn't feel good. I'm going to do this instead. Yeah. Never have I gone into a space and they'd be like, put your hand this way and do this thing, because then that's not... Right. But they're not learning anything from that. That's very contrived, and it is less that they can, extrapolate from that. Yeah. So I still have...
you go for it. I was just going to ask, have you found... So now that you've done this across several different, countries and different places, is it consistent in the way that it's run? I mean, I'm imagining if it's going to be done at all correctly, it needs to be made very carefully so that you feel totally safe. And that, are there kind of like a consistent approach that places have?
Yes and no. So I've worked for institutions. Like I worked for universities, MFA programs, or like the Corcoran School is like a continuing education certificate kind of program. I've worked for those where, I sign these contracts that give me agency, that if I feel uncomfortable, if this thing happens, these are the people I report it to. But that's less common, and I work more for independent studios or open gallery space, gallery spaces, independent artists who host, drawing sessions every couple weeks. And it's more of this, I get there early, I always do, and I just talk to them. I ask them, what is they're looking for? And an aware visual artist and the people who lead these classes, who've worked with models for so long, will say, what do you need? Like, how can I provide a space? Never have I gone into a space, actually, I have gone into a space before where I felt uncomfortable, but I knew why. It's because there was no designated area for me, which they almost always have, even if it's just like a bathroom or, a folding wall. And those kinds of things, as well as I think before I come in, especially if like it's an intro to figure drawing class, I won't be there the very first week. They'll have a couple sessions with like a dummy or a mannequin. And I think they talk to them about what it is going to be like, right? Usually they are far more uncomfortable than I am. And the teachers will set the precedent of, like absolutely no pictures and absolutely, no doing these things. But you can talk to her. She's a real person and she's here for those reasons, to interact with you. And I find myself so much more comfortable when people do talk to me and they don't treat me like I'm like in a box.
Yeah.
I think that breaks these levels. Yeah.
I feel like I could totally see that.
Yeah.
And you described it also as meditative.
Yeah.
Is it something that it sounds, to me, that sounds like a practice, So like, it's not something you just go to, like, your mind is somewhere else and you're just going there to make money or something. I mean, it's like, if it's meditative and if it's this experience that's bringing you these kinds of feelings about your relationship to the space and to the people in the space.
And my body.
And your body. Mm-hmm. It sounds like, it sounds like a practice of like, it sounds like you could be choosing to do that to, I don't know if do work on what it feels like to be in your body is the right phrasing, but there's something along those lines.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. This is interesting. So what you were saying, right, this like mix of vulnerability, but also control, right? It's that active choice. Like, I am going to present myself in this way. I am, clothing myself. That's my choice. And as someone who has experienced sexual assault and being unclothed, not wantingly, to reclaim that. And it was a huge reason why I did it. Like my sophomore year in college, I was experiencing some things and a friend was like, it might be really like reclamatory and really healing. And I don't think there's maybe if someone is super in tune with themselves that a one session could be reclamatory and healing for them. But it is years of doing it that I have learned and have been able to take that in my real life with me. It is not a one time, I'm naked, now I feel amazing with my body. It's definitely not that. But the meditativeness definitely comes from when you are sitting in a frozen, well, it's not frozen, right? It's like in yoga, the active stretch, right? They say like downward dog and child's pose are not frozen poses. You're still actively engaged.
As much as I want them to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
and that's the thing with modeling. It's like, you can't just sit there because the whole point of you being there is to be alive. They could just get a mannequin if they didn't want someone breathing and moving. And so even in poses that you hold, usually don't do poses longer than 30 minutes. Even if you're sitting there for 30 minutes.
That sounds like a long time.
It is a long time. It's like you hit minute 12 and your body's like, I'm done with this. And then you have to find a way to push past it mentally, physically, but also like emotionally and spiritually. You have to be like, what can I do to continue energy flowing in my body? And what can I do to make this pose new each breath? And that's where like this meditative practice comes in, where I just get into this zone and I like do these really deep body scans and I'm like releasing tension. And then all of a sudden, whoop, the next 15 minutes passes and I'm like, I'm done.
Wow. That to me sounds like, so you just described a whole nother layer of this experience where it's not just about the control or the relationships in the room, but because you're having to maintain these poses and breathe into them and sort of exist through them, suddenly that's about, it sounds to me like there's a layer of being so present with your body that the people are no longer there or no longer matter.
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
like a
definitely.
whole other thing going on.
Yeah, because if you, there's like, it's kind of like theater, right? If you're performing for the audience as opposed to your scene partners or for the world of the play, then it becomes hyper performative, right? We are performing, and maybe that's the point of certain plays, but let's say a supernaturalistic play where you're on stage with one person and all you're doing is trying to wink at the audience, the world is broken. And I think that's a big part of figure modeling is that like most, very you're thinking like high Renaissance paintings or, of a lot of, especially women, we think that these people are just like existing in midair, but they're not always like making direct eye contact unless it's a portrait, right? Or these grand poses of women, they feel so ethereal. And it's because I always think that like they're existing in this space for the artist, but not to the artist, if that makes sense. And I try to do this thing where like especially if it's a class and there's like 10 people, I'm not going to be able to like, someone's going to get my backside and someone's going to get my front side. And it has to be as equally important, all elements. And so if I'm able to stay as present with myself and not performative, then it becomes more interesting and natural. And then there's something going on. There's a story, there's a truth that's existing that they can capture.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah. It's really wonderful. I love figure modeling. Yeah.
And there's nothing, there's very little, so comparing it to theatrical practice is instructive to me, because one of the hardest thing, maybe the hardest thing to do theatrically is nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So like to walk across a stage and stand, or to walk across a stage and sit, and to just be there without kind of performatively doing something is incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And it sounds like these sessions are sort of this extended practice of not doing. Of just being.
Which is really interesting you say that, because I'm thinking like, like Stanislavski, the whole thing where he like put a chair on stage and told his students to sit in the chair. And the first time, like none of them could do it. They would like do things. And he was like, just sit in the chair. And sometimes I'm literally sitting in a chair and I have to tell myself like, that is enough. I'm enough.
Yeah.
There's something, there is a truth that they will discern whatever it is. And I don't have to try to do something else, because if I do, then it's not real. Then I'm not figure modeling. I'm acting, and I'm not supposed to act. So it's interesting. It's like the classic thing of a more inexperienced actor. When they're on a set with furniture, they'll spend a lot of time like dusting the furniture, because you just feel like I should be doing something. Yeah. Or there's this story to make a weird reference, the kind of left field reference. There's a story, Sir Patrick Stewart talking about Star Trek and how the costumes for Star Trek, which are pretty simple, there's not pockets, and he said that some of the actors who would have fidgeting problems of like, how, what do I do with my hands, basically? And which he said for especially for like a Shakespeare trained actor, the answer is nothing. And that's really hard. It's really hard to just like let them be there and not feel like they need to be doing, like hanging out and fiddling and all
stuff.
The things.
That's really cool. So you're getting these just extended sessions of space and time and heightened experience. Like this isn't just going into your room to meditate. This is like a particularly heightened, your attention is particularly focused on where you are and what is in the room and how your body's in the room. Yeah. And then you just get to be.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
Is it Stanislavski too that had sort of the rings of awareness? Is that what? There's another.
I don't know.
There's another. It's Michael Chekhov. Michael Chekhov talks about these rings of awareness, and that there's like 7 of them. And the first is inner. The second is like our body. The third is the tangible air around us, and then it moves all the way out until like the audience, and then the space that we are occupying with our theater. And with all, especially realism, Chekhov. This is Michael Chekhov, but still, like realism is we're extending that awareness. And I often feel like with every session, like if I do a 30-minute sitting, I take a break, and I do another 30 minutes sitting within this one space, and my rings of awareness are just like seeping. And if that's something too, if sometimes it's hard as meditating in general is, or clearing our mind. Sometimes I sit, and if I'm having a shitty day, it's very, very hard to turn my brain off. And so finding something like, well, how can I like my soft focus, right? How can I like just consume this entire space as like non-judgmentally and softly as I can? And I kind of think of this like circle around myself, like extending.
Oh, I love this. There's so much about this that I just had no idea was going on, and B, love so much.
I know.
So I have a funny like technical question about it. Oh, I interrupted you.
Oh no, I was gonna just say like what you were saying too. Like people often are just like, you just sit there, and I'm like, but it's so much more than that. And they're like, it sounds so easy, and I'm like, it's not.
It's really not. I was actually just gonna ask sort of a technical question about the just sitting there. I'm fascinated by sessions where you need to reproduce a pose.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So the very technical thing is before I get up, so like I have my timer, 25 minutes goes. Before I get up, the very outwards of my body, so if I'm sitting on a chair, if I'm laying on the ground, they will put usually a piece of painter's tape, like on my foot, on my head, somewhere that I have a base to go back to. Sometimes, and this is much rare, but sometimes they will, on my phone, take a picture just so that we have like a reference point. But usually, if I've been sitting for that long, it's imprinting on my body. Like I know how that feels. And I remember this really specifically. I was at a like an event. This one woman was an artist, and I met her at a class, and she said she was going to host like an open house couple-hour event and wanted me to come do a long pose for a couple hours so people could kind of move in and out. And I was sitting against this fireplace with a couple pillows, and I had my legs in a very specific way. And I like had my hand kind of in this gesture. And I remember that I had like my finger open, so that, you know, hands are always the hardest thing to draw. So when you really like accentuate them, people get very excited. So I had my hand in this pose. I took like a 10-15 minute break, and I sat back down, and I put my hands that way, but my finger wasn't extended. And within like 4 or 5 seconds, I was like, oh, this feels different. And I extended my finger, and someone laughed so hard and was like, I was just about to tell you your finger was right, but I didn't want to like be rude. And I was like, oh no, I can feel it. I just needed to get back into it. And so it's kind of like learning lines. You know, when you sit with lines, they imprint. And when you walk away and come back to them, you remember what you remember. And when you sit somewhere for 25 minutes in this like headspace and you come back to it, there's a part of you that like knows, especially if you've been doing it for a while. It just knows what you're supposed to do. And if you have a little piece of tape that you're like, great, that's where my knee is, then you can situate the rest of your body to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a lot is going on with that.
Yeah, it is a lot.
And yet nothing is going on.
I know. It's the hardest part.
What an internal experience that is.
Yeah, and that's why it's never just sitting, right? You have to have so much awareness, because if you're doing that long of a pose too, there's going to be moments within the moment, like within the sitting, that you're going to move your body. You have to, like, you know, if your legs are folded, I have to take a moment to open my legs and close them again. But it's using that awareness of looking around the room and seeing. Often you can tell on the paper where the artists are, and, you know, they do a very basic sketch and then they get back into it. And I just kind of will do a glance and like see if everyone is in a thing. They're not using me at that moment. And I'll just shift for 5-10 seconds and move back into it and go back. And those types of awarenesses too, of being like, when is the moment that I get to take my 5-second break that I need to stretch? When is it that I can swallow or like do a thing that won't affect them? And that's part of it too.
Yeah, it really, so there's, I mean, I'm so delighted by the how I'm imagining your attention and how many layers your attention is encompassing, and how being in a space with other people, all of you being still, how much, like, what an incredibly potent scenario or context for all of this kind of expansive or focused, or like there's just so much play in here of attention, of mindfulness. Wow. It's really cool.
It is cool. It is cool. And people are so grateful. There's this, I'm trying to make an analogy, but it's not going to work. If you are an artist who works with the body, you can't do that unless you have a body. And so people are always so grateful. And I've never felt uncomfortable. And usually you can tell when people feel uncomfortable, right? And the way to cut that is on my first break, I just walk around and I talk to people. What are you doing here? Can I see your work? And the coolest part, it is the hyper judgmental part of myself, is after the session is done, going through and looking at everyone's work.
Oh, sure.
But it's so fascinating to see that is me, but that's not how I see myself, and that's okay. Or wow, that is exactly how I see myself. That is weird. And it's it is fun to do a scan and to look and see people seeing me. People always watch my reactions to their work. So I'll try to be very neutral, and I'll try to not be like, oh. But sometimes there are things that I just look at and I'm like, that is so me. Can I take a picture of it? And people are like, oh yes, absolutely.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Something you just said was spurring a thought, and now I've lost it. It'll come back to me, I'm sure. It'll come back. Has anyone ever given you a drawing?
Actually, yes. That very first sitting that I did, he made this the man who ran he was kind of like the coordinator. He made this painting that was just of my bust, and it's really interesting. It's kind of profile, but not fully, and I'm looking down. And my pose that I was doing was really interesting, but he didn't capture that at all, which I always find very fascinating. And he used really hot pinks and purples and greens. So the coloring itself is very Warhol in a way, and it's on canvas. And he gave it to me, and I shipped it across the sea to myself, and it has followed me to every single apartment, and it's quite large. I mean, it's that's probably 28 inches by, even long. It's big. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, that's my favorite. But I do have a couple pencil sketches. I do have some stuff that people have given me. Sometimes I'm like, okay, thank you, and I just kind of put it somewhere. But there's a few that are special to me that I have kept.
What a wonderful gift.
Yeah.
And I thought of the other thing that this reminded me of is back in the olden days in college, I took it was a set design class, and one of the homework assignments was to in order to design a set properly, you need to have an understanding of human bodies.
Right.
And how they're going to exist in the set. Mm-hmm. And every set design needed to have a figure drawing in it so you could understand proportion. And so in service to that, we had a homework assignment to go home, stand naked in front of a mirror and draw ourselves. Wow. And it was one of the hardest assignments for everybody.
I can imagine.
It was really, really hard to stand. I mean, you're just not used to, or at least most of us weren't used to at that moment in our lives, looking at ourselves naked and trying to draw it. And I think for a lot of people, it brought up a lot of stuff to have to really focus and try to capture what your body looks like.
Yeah.
And so even just being, that was hard, is just being alone in a room with no one but yourself and just taking in your body, just the unclothed body in that format. That felt challenging. And, maybe partially it felt challenging because it was immediately closing the loop. It wasn't just being vulnerable. It was being vulnerable and then also immediately perceiving yourself. You were seeing the drawing at the end, right at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And so they were combined experiences, but
it's very hard.
It was quite challenging. And so I'm just, for those of us who might not ever be brave enough to be in a figure drawing class, you could still probably experience some of these things by just trying to be your own audience and just like take yourself in and like be there with yourself, you know?
It's that mirror and the fact that you have to make that sketch that's actually like more daunting to me than like being there.
Letting someone else.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because there's a lot of stuff to judge at that point, because it's like, not only am I like taking in my body, but also I'm not a good drawer. Like, this stinks, you know. So you're maybe you're upset or you're frustrated that you can't draw correctly. And what a fun thing to learn about. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Oh, sure.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell me about it? There doesn't have to be.
You know, it's one of those things that is I don't know a lot of other figure models. And it's something I actually took when the pandemic first started, and I was really excited. I had a really awesome gig booked that I was going to go to this artist retreat in like May, and I was going to work for these artists, and I was going to be like all weekend. It was going to be amazing. And of course it got canceled, and I was really upset about it. So I saw that there's like a DMV art model league, like a collective that just like a community. It's not like really does anything, but there's a community for resources and stuff like that. And they were saying, you know, people are trying to do online modeling, and there's a lot of gray area with that for so many reasons. And they said, like, for anyone who's a DC figure model who's, you know, actively working in the area, let's just like meet and talk, and maybe we can help each other figure out some things. So they led these workshops where they helped you kind of set up a space, and they talked to you about safety protocols and other things to advocate for yourself, and maybe how to do your own marketing for, I'm going to have an open drawing session. People can stop by my Zoom call. And we all talked about how, like, we don't know other models, and it's a very lonely thing to do. You go into this space with strangers, you take your clothes off, they draw you, and then you leave, and you don't see other models ever. And so it was kind of nice to talk to them about that, and to talk about how, like, it feels extremely competitive because you don't see other people, but it's really not. It's just a thing that a very niche specific type of person would want to do. And so it was really nice to meet them. And unfortunately, I haven't been able, well, maybe not unfortunately, I haven't done any online sessions. I'm not very interested in doing that. If people were like, oh, here.
That feels different to me.
Yeah. It wouldn't be totally unclothed. They say, especially because for your own safety, like you a bathing suit or like a leotard is what you should do. So I would do that. But I do miss it. I really do miss it.
Yeah.
But I think it'll feel different when I'm in a space, and I'll be like, okay, this is what I've been waiting for.
I mean, there's so many. I'm getting emotional about all the things we've learned are not the same over a screen. And in this particular case, it's so much harder to guarantee that it's done safely and correctly. And it gives people so much more power over you that they shouldn't have. Yeah,
for sure. And it's also like, this is what someone said to me. I'm just like looking at my windows and thinking this. They're like, if I wanted to draw online, I would just look at a picture. Like the light. No, that's a huge thing too, is that when I go into a space, I am not the person that sets the lights ever, ever, ever. The teacher always does. They position me. They tell me this is your area because it's 10 a.m. and this is where the sun is. Or if it's 6 p.m., you're over here because this is where the sun is. And so I would then have to be in charge of all my light sources and making sure that I had enough contour. And that is not my specialty, unfortunately. I think I could do it, but I am not the one who will be drawing myself. So I am not the one who should say, like, this is what my light is. So that's the artist's job. They're the one who controls the light. So it is why I'm nervous about it too, just because, you know, that's not what we do. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that all makes a lot of sense. I feel so delighted by all of this. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me about it. I knew that whatever we talked about, I was going to enjoy it, but this was even more than I expected. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, when I talk about figure modeling, I get very happy. So thank you.
It's really cool. I can see why. This just like made my whole morning. Thank you.
Of course.